as on Facebook, as well as on Twitter. I don't know what the issues are, but Facebook has been down in most regions for some time now. So I don't know what the issue is. So if you can't hear me on Facebook, problems with their live stream. They're having problems posting stuff, as a matter of fact, because I didn't realize it, but I couldn't post anything this morning. Because when I'm done, typically I'm done for the day. You know how life is. So it is what it is, right? It is what it is. It's Thursday, and we are having what would be considered pretty normal weather at this time of the year here in Michigan, especially. And we give thanks for that. We're extremely grateful because we don't often get a chance in Michigan to have pretty normal weather. I mean, our weather is such that it just bombs out of nowhere, like, hey, ho, hey. That's our weather. So we're so very grateful that our weather seems to have taken time to just calm down and be with us and just be normal. And we are just so very grateful for that, right? So, we're going to talk a lot today about good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for. I know you can't see me on Facebook, but you can join me on Twitter and you can join me on YouTube. So, we made sure we said that. So, hopefully, people will get the message out and will see that. And they'll click on the link that will take them directly to youtube.com so that they can join us. It's out there. We might have some tornadoes here in Michigan later on today. I'm reading the news feed, and it's amazing to me how people uh, are going in. I mean, competition here is something else. Sometimes you just want people to. I guess it's an open field, isn't it? It's an open field. Everybody's trying to do it at the same time that I'm doing it. Uh, trying to trying to. Sometimes people just want to copy your thing, but they say that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Do you think that is so? I don't know. I don't know. I can't believe Detroit Water and Sewage Department uh, had the nerve. Had the nerve uh, to uh, to send me a note. Oh. Uh, I'm sorry, somebody messaged me and I had to respond to it. So today we have this awesome show that we're going to talk to you about, and we're going to talk about white privilege in America and what the college cheating scandal is teaching us about white privilege, right? Because it is apparent that there is something nefarious going on that people want to stuff down our throats, and people want us to be a part of and to absorb that really has nothing to do with the real issue. I mean, the late night shows last night went in on this whole college cheating thing. I mean, I think Trevor Noah did it best when he said he superimposed the face of a young white kid, a teenager, white male teenager, onto the physique and body of a black man playing basketball and saying, "Oh, this is little Joshua, and little Joshua was a champion at the state championship." And I was rolling on the floor laughing because that was so apropos, because that's exactly what it comes down to. It's the rich and powerful and the wealthy grabbing opportunity out of the hands of those who are really talented and gifted. That's really what it comes down to. And just because they have the money and have more money does not mean that they should have more access, does not mean that they should have access. If the playing field is level, which is what college in America was designed to be, then the playing field should be that it's level. It shouldn't be what it is. So I want to talk about that today. We're going to go in on that. And I solicit your comments, and I want you to talk back to us. I may have to post this video to my YouTube video. I may have to post this to Facebook because it's just not connecting. Facebook has just gone crazy. But what a world we live in. Imagine that. So 10, 11 years ago when Facebook first started, right? Most of us, I think, joined Facebook in 2009 because by 2008 it was a thing, right? So we kind of said, well, let's see what this is all about, right? So let's say 2007, 2008, 2005, 2006. What kind of world did we live in without Facebook? That now some of us are so addicted. Is addicted the right word, y'all? Is addicted the right word to describe what this is? We're so addicted to Facebook and so addicted to social media that it just is impossible. We were talking about privilege and so on, and I was talking to someone just recently, and we talked about how our children are not looking for opportunities, right? And conversely speaking, whilst there's white privilege and whilst the wealthy have access and they pay for stuff, yes, they do. They quit lying. Wealthy people pay for stuff all the time. They grease people's palms. They pay for people to do stuff for them. They pay for everything. Things don't just happen for them. And you're like, wow, the glory cloud just fell down from the sky and it just landed on Thomas Jefferson III. No, it did not. Thomas Jefferson III's parents paid to ensure that Thomas Jefferson would have that job and would have that access. So wealthy people need to quit lying. There is nothing that they can tell the rest of us from now on about anything that they have done. And it makes you, I don't know about you, but I've always wondered about that. I've always said to myself, do they really expect me to believe that their kids are super because they were born that way? And I'm like, no, they just had access to better access than we did. I just felt like they had more access to things that commute power, and that they had access to more resources, right? More than we do. That's how I've always felt, right? But it's nice to see being justified that that's what it was, because I've always felt that maybe they trained better. They could pay for, my thinking was they could afford to pay for better coaches, private coaches, and personal trainers for their kids, and they could pay for more tutors for their kids. That's how I looked at it. I had no idea. And I've always thought that they were too busy going to parties. And have you ever watched Gossip Girl? If you want to know what it looks like to be a privileged white teenager in American society, watch Gossip Girl. That's an inside look at what really goes on, right? So I've always felt like they pretty much just jet from one city to the other, go to parties after parties. I didn't think they had much time to study. I thought their parents paid for everything and made donations to organizations so that they could get jobs, so that they could run for office. I've always felt like that was the thing. They paid off reporters so all their scandals stay hidden. I've always felt like that was the bane of the wealthy, right? So I was never the one who believed that, well, their kids are super because they're born super. I never believed that. I don't think so. I think you're going to be surprised to know that a lot of what you take for granted is actually really equally distributed. Intelligence, number one, is equally distributed. We just don't tap into it, okay? And those of us, the few of us who do, get derided and picked on by others. Talents and gifts are equally distributed, right? Some people have more than others, but there is no such thinking that people who are wealthy are more talented and gifted than anyone else. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Okay? Good looks. They might be able to have more plastic surgery, so they end up looking very plastic, but good looks are not fair. So people want attributes of certain parts of the society. For instance, some white women, they want fuller lips. Well, they go get collagen and go get plastic surgery to plump their lips up. They want to look perpetually young, so they go put fillers in their faces to keep their faces looking more youthful, right? So they want bigger boobs, they go have surgery to have bigger boobs. They want bigger butts, they go have surgery to have bigger butts. They want to be slimmer, they go have surgery to get slimmer. Whatever the trend is, the trend right now is to have bigger butts. Well, they're paying a lot of money for that. When the trend turns around and goes back to being skinny like a reed, I guess they will find their way back to that, right? When the trend is, well, look your age. Well, what is that? My age is nothing but a number, right? You will see. So I just want you to know that, we're going to go in and talk about that. But I also wanted to talk about gatekeepers. You know who gatekeepers are. You just experienced that in a college cheating scandal. Gatekeepers are the people who monitor and man access to your vantage points, right? So typically the gatekeeper is the assistant who answers the phone, won't let you have access to the boss, and you need the boss to okay a project. That's the gatekeeper. They do a terrific job of keeping you away from access. Well, in this college cheating scandal, there's one thing you learned. The gatekeepers were who? They were guarding the Bastille, right? Weren't they? They were guarding the castle. The gatekeepers were the proctors who were doing exams for kids, right? Sitting beside kids in SATs and telling them what is right and what is wrong. The gatekeepers are the coaches, and the gatekeepers are those who run businesses that teach kids how to create a successful college admissions program. And he called it successful while he was pocketing millions of dollars in bribes and paying off everybody to get everybody in, and making the rest of us feel like, well, if you don't sign up for his program, you just can't, you're just a loser. Who is a loser now? So all that and more is what we're going to talk about. So I'm holding up a flyer for that says Trip of a Lifetime. It's a play that will take place in Detroit, and it will take place on the, let's see what date it is. I like plays. I like to see people's creativity. It takes place on Saturday, March 23rd at 7 p.m., 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. at the Paul Robeson Theater at 18100 Meyer in Detroit. And this is a play that's called A Trip of a Lifetime. Go figure. Quite the interesting thing. Just look at that. I liked it. I saw the flyer and I was like, let me see that. Trip of a Lifetime. The play takes place on Saturday, March 23rd at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. at the Paul Robeson Theater at 18100 Meyer in Detroit. Detroit has a rich cultural heritage that just keeps on going. You know, the techno music craze was founded in downtown Detroit, and eventually to become successful, they moved to Detroit. They was founded in one of the Metro Detroit communities, but in order to get successful, they moved to Detroit and they were launched because Detroit has a bigger name, a bigger brand, and is known for music. So Detroit is quite the leader in commerce. I'm sorry, in industry, yeah, and also in culture. So here in Detroit, we have quite a rich musical heritage. Everybody knows about Motown, right? And everybody knows how that transformed the climate, the history behind Motown. Blacks came up from the South and found their way here to produce music and to sing in musical bands. Some of them lived here while they were performers, and then they moved to California, where everything was happening. 'Cause people, I think people just wanted better weather, frankly. But they also wanted to get out of the small-mindedness of living in a Midwestern town because there's too much racism involved. You want to go where people's minds are a little bit more open and people are more keen on doing stuff. It's like even in California now, the governor of California has signed an executive order that says there'll be no executions. That means anyone on death row, they have over 256 people on death row, was that it? Or 700 and so people on death row? No one will be executed. They've placed a moratorium on executions. So nobody is going to be killed on death row in California. I don't know how I feel about that. How do you feel about that? I feel like if you murder someone, some of these people are notorious. They have murdered more than one people, more than one person. Some of them are serial killers. I don't know that them sitting on death row makes us any more humane. I think what they did was inhuman enough. But the thinking behind a lot of these new agendas and so on is that people are saying, well, they were murderers because they never got a chance. They were never in an environment where they could succeed. They were never told they could succeed. So as a result, we as a society owe them for the mistakes they made in killing someone, because if they were exposed to better and they knew better, then they would act better. That's the thinking behind a lot of these movements and Renaissance movements that are directed at correcting the ills of societies, that they think that if people had better access to opportunities, then they would not commit some of the crimes they did. And to some extent, that might be true, because let's face it, I know of and have interacted with people who went to jail, and I've heard of people who went to jail because they went to jail for robbing a convenience store. There's a guy on Facebook, Richard Horn Jr., go look him up. Richard Horn, Horne, has written a tremendous book called The Making of a Trailblazer, in which he tells his own story of how when he was 12, his parents got divorced, they became homeless, and to stay off the streets in the cold, he pretended to have a gun at a convenience store, and they put him in juvie because he was 12. But he said it got him off the streets. He had somewhere warm to be, and he had food. So the thinking behind a lot of this liberal ideology is that if people know better, they will do better. And if people are exposed to better ways of thinking, then they will act better. Now, that might be utopian in its ideology and philosophy. I don't know that it translates necessarily, because there is a base human nature that exists in the people who commit certain violent crimes. And that is what in a former society they explored more and reacted to, as opposed to this prevailing ideology that people commit these crimes because they just don't have better access, right, to resources. I don't know that that's true, because I don't have better access to resources, but I'm not murdering anybody or become a serial killer or trashing people's businesses or tearing people's places up. So I don't know that that's necessarily true. But if you look at, and this is within the context of privilege and white privilege, right? Let's expand it for just a second. And you feel free to join in, chime in, my viewers here on YouTube. Feel free to chime in to tell, your own story of what this is. Because frankly, a lot of people, and I say a lot of people, don't understand how privilege works and how privilege sounds. Privilege has its own way of thinking. It has its own body of thoughts and its own body of actions and its own body of customs and norms, right? And there are certain things that people of a certain class, certain group do. Just like certain people of a certain culture, there are certain commonalities in their culture. Similarly with privilege. But the base of privilege exists is that privilege is given to the few. And you're either born this way or you earn it this way. And the people who earn it and work their way up into it are just as bad as the people who were born into it. Because let's face it, it represents achievement. It represents access. It means if you ever get into a situation, your parents can make a phone call, your lawyers can make a phone call, and the justice system is going to react to your status. This is why I say all the time to people, make sure you follow the law and be very careful, because at the end of the day, that's all you have if you're not part of the privileged set, right? And so privilege has its own ways of thinking. And this is a worldwide thing. This is not just confined to the US. In other cultures, privilege is reinforced by class and birth. So where you are born, who you are born to, that's who it reinforces who you are, right? Here in America, privilege is more about achievement. You work your way into it, or you earn your way into it. So either way, if your parents were the Vanderbilts or the Carnegies, good for you. But if they're not, if your mother is just Beyonce, then you're kind of born into it because you grew up in a certain way, right? Exposed to a certain kind of way of life. Now, once upon a time, people were really angry about that kind of stuff because the playing fields of life were never level, right? So people had to agitate, the masses had to agitate to overturn the way of the systems that existed in human civilization that prevented people from moving forward. So the masses had to recognize that there are more of us than there are of them. And so the masses went crazy, went and organized themselves so that they could have access to the same resources that the privileged few do. And who wouldn't? Let me ask you this as a person, right? Do you feel that it's fair for someone who is white and who never paid the price to go to school to just get up and go to school? No, you don't like that. Not the same school you go to, not if the criteria is that you must maintain a certain GPA, you must have certain passing scores, and if you're getting in on an athletic program or a sports program, you ought to be able to at least play the sport or excel at the sport, right? That's the level field. That's the level playing field that should exist. And it has to be maintained to rid ourselves of the prevailing culture that the more money you have is the more access you have. And that's what's killing a lot of us, because people are killing themselves trying to make it. You meet drug dealers or hear of drug dealers. There's a show on there's a film on Amazon Prime called Wait. WEIGHT, The Wait. And it's set here in Detroit, and it's about a local drug dealer who had no choice but to become a drug dealer from he was like 12 or 13 or 14. So by the time he arrived in his 30s, he had done time, but he had built quite a network, and he had built quite a net worth that even his family did not know the means that existed. He played in both worlds. He ran in both the privileged world and the world here where he was making money. And he kept the two worlds apart so they didn't collide until he went to jail. Then he got them together to help him get out of jail, right? And when you looked at it, you had to marvel at his finesse. You had to marvel at his way of thinking, that he saw a problem that he wanted to prevent that shouldn't happen to him or his family members going forward. So what he sought to do was to ensure that none of this was going to take place, right? So that's all he was trying to do. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what a lot of us try to do, right? Isn't it? That's what a lot of us try to do. We try to make sure that we go for the prize. The problem is the barriers that exist. Now, let's look at it. The playing field should be level, right? The playing field says to go to college. We're going to use that hypothetically speaking. The playing field is that you should, to get into certain colleges, you should have a certain GPA. I'm getting a little warm. The heat is turned up, right? So you should have a certain GPA, or you should have, if you're getting it on a sports program, you should have a certain way of, you should play a certain sport, or you should have certain scores or certain skills in that sport. That's the playing field, right? Okay, sounds good, right? All right. But what happens invariably is that that is not the case. That is not the case at all. What you find is that depending on who you know, right? Depending on how well your parents know them, how well your mother, father, your family name, what it means, that's how you get in. So then you have people who have privilege because they buy their way into privilege, right? Because they have made a lot of money, they live in certain zip codes, they live in certain places, and so they socialize among certain groups. And people like to maintain that. And I tell you how this is because once upon a time in my life, I lived like that. So there were certain customs and norms amongst certain groups, right? And it was, you felt a certain type of way, you shop at certain stores, you wear certain brands of clothing. I'm trying to think of all the ways you connect. You drive certain kinds of cars, right? Now, if you're super wealthy, you drive anything you want, but you drive, right? But you live, you do your lawn a certain way, you do certain, there's certain customs that are common. You go to the country club certain days, you sip certain kind of drinks, you vacation certain places. Those are all hallmarks of the privilege. Now, I don't know about you, but as I matured, I would rather say I matured, right? As I matured, it bothered me less and less. Frankly, I didn't care. I started to not care because I started to think that at the end of the day, we're all the same. I started to think that at the end of the day, when I go in for surgery, one of the things that made me aware was when I lived in a certain zip code. And if I went to one day, I went to the emergency room because I was beaten up. And because I lived in a certain zip code, I had access to a different hospital, right? So I went to the hospital and I was treated differently, right? They took you in a different way. The doctors responded to, they seemed to be impressed by you, seemed to respond to you by the address, right? So the staff treated you a certain way. They're like, oh, this is common. You know, we see people coming here with this from that area all the time. And I'm like, do all the men here get together and beat their wives up? Uh, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So there's certain things, I shouldn't make fun of it, but it is what it is, right? But seriously speaking, though, what happens is people, we have certain commonalities, and the way that the system is designed to work has failed. It literally has failed us. So the college cheating scandal has reminded us that there is an unseen barrier in America. It's called white privilege. And it exists only for whites. Because here's the thing, a black person who is wealthy, who's trying to get their kids into college, encounter barriers just like another black person does. What they do is they try to work through the barriers within the people they know. And they try to pretend that I have made the money and these barriers still exist. So they refuse to accept, some of them refuse to accept that it's about color because it comes back down to this. So when you get up there and all the money is there, people start looking around and say, well, how can we keep less people in? So they're going to go right back to what their society is accustomed to doing, is making it about our appearance, how we look. And how do we look? We're either white, black, or brown. So they're going to make it so that only people who look white enter in. And that's what this college cheating scandal is teaching us, because nobody else in that stuff has emerged amongst those 800 people to be brown. It's all about white people. So what they were doing was reinforcing the ethic that being white is what works in America. I would just want you to look around and look even in the communities where you live. Does that offend you that there are people of other colors and ethnicities in the communities where you live? Does it offend you? And this helps us to understand why there are few colored professors in academia across the United States. Because if there are more colored professors, what is going to happen? They're going to what? admit more people of color. So it explains to you why you go to some colleges, for instance, and the ivory towered mentality exists. They're all white. And they're all the tenured professors are white. The adjunct professors are usually people of color, except in cases where the adjunct professor is someone who has achieved something in a similar field, right? So they feel like if they give them the course material, they can just go expound on it. But very few enter that world. Do you see what I'm saying? And so we have to level the playing field. And I applaud the law enforcement community for going after this and exposing it. They've created a tremendous conversation in this country about white privilege. It has expanded the context for people who were unaware that now you must be aware. So now you must rise up. Now you must talk about it. And now you must go after it and pursue it because it has to come down. These barriers and walls must come down. They've got to. They've got to come down because we cannot continue for this. This just can't continue. The society has changed dramatically. White people all over the world, white people in Europe and white people in America are becoming more and more of a minority simply because they're not having as many children. Over the last 50 years, they just weren't procreating as many. That's all that it came down to. And then society had advanced, so people of color began to emerge educationally. Let's say, for instance, here in America, it used to be that only white people worked certain jobs. And black people were told that in order for you to be in this job, you had to have a degree. So black people went to college en masse and got degrees, with the same way that white women went to college so they could get a degree, so it could change their way. They didn't have to marry early and they didn't have to start having children early when they didn't want to, right? So black people went and got degrees and came back to get the jobs that they were told you had to have a degree to get. When they came back to get the jobs, they raised the standard a little bit higher, but there were white people working in those jobs who didn't have degrees, but were still there. And whom, when they realized, when the white establishment realized what they had done, they were like, okay, just send him to school and get a degree. Call so-and-so over there and let him do some coursework and let him get a degree. So every time people of color, that happened here. So black people went back and got advanced degrees. And they still don't get the same jobs as whites do. I'm constantly amazed at how many black professionals have advanced degrees. I am constantly amazed at the number of black professionals who have a master's degree and a PhD who do not have the same jobs. And their white boss has a bachelor's, sometimes from some unknown school. And yet there are black people who are way more qualified, but who never get the same opportunity. You think I'm joking? Happens all the time. Let's say even here in Detroit, in the school system here in Detroit, you will find a plethora of teachers, black teachers with master's degrees. Some even have PhDs. There's one teacher at Renaissance High School who is the only person in Michigan with 2 PhDs in physics. Why is she teaching? Why isn't she at the Space Center in Port Canaveral or in Houston? Why is she not working with the government, with the National Weather Service? Physics? Are you kidding me? Do you see what I'm talking about? And yet you go to suburban schools and the teachers over there have a teaching certificate. Hello, maybe a bachelor's, maybe, but they have a teaching certificate. But here, there are more black teachers with PhDs, yeah, and master's degrees. It's not evenly distributed. The playing field is not level. When you see that there's an inequity in the system, it tells us that the playing field is not level. It tells us that something is wrong and has gone very wrong. That should not happen. As far as I'm concerned, to be a teacher, why do you need a master's degree? You should have a teacher certificate because they present you with the material that you need to teach. So go do your research on it. They give you the course material. The rest of it is left up to your natural intelligence. Why do you need a master's degree to teach? I am constantly amazed at principals in black schools in urban districts all over this country who have master's degrees and PhDs, and their white counterparts have a bachelor's degree and is in the job for 20 years. I am constantly amazed. You know what that also tells me? They're not paid the same. I guarantee you they're not paid the same. I can guarantee you that. That's the system we need to tear down. And I've been saying it for years now that the system of institutionalized racism is the problem. And then guess what we do as blacks? We copy this. Because I told you yesterday about the person in Metro Detroit, here in Detroit, who worked for the University of Michigan and who had access. So he sold college admissions to his wealthy friends and their children who could afford to pay the school fee anyway. They could afford to pay the tuition anyway. But he sold them the access to get into Michigan because it's perceived to be like a public Ivy League. You know, it's a public school, but it has the prestige of an Ivy League university. And this black man sold it to his wealthy friends instead of ensuring that the program was designed for children whose parents were not wealthy to get them into college based on their merit, that they were smart and that they had the gifts and talents. Are you hearing me? Uncle Tom mentality. I don't speak to people like that. No wonder the feds ended up catching him up in a different system and ended up catching him up, because this stuff has got to stop. And people of color, we need to stop creating barriers too. We need to stop perpetuating the racist myths that continue to divide us. We have become the problem to ourselves. So we have enough dealing with white people and racism and white privilege and institutionalized racism, but we ourselves continue to perpetuate it by constantly asking people to do this and do that. Are you hearing me? So we got to stop this. The reason that this, let me tell you what has become apparent. The reason this has become apparent and it has come out is because we've come to a point now where either we change this way or it's going to go the other way. Because we're on a sliding scale where it's sliding to a disaster. It's a disastrous end. And this has come up as a way of solving it to make sure we don't end up in that disastrous end. Have you ever watched the movie The Hunger Games? You do realize that could be a reality someday. May not be today, but it could be a reality someday. Well, that's what privilege does. Have you watched the movie? Did you see how privilege is distributed in the movie? And how they have barriers that prevent people from going from one place to the other? And the wealthy live way over here where no one else can have access to them? If you think that that's not a reality, that's going to happen, think again. So right now, the last bastion to level the playing field was going to college. So they had to create barriers to make it more difficult for smart kids from marginalized communities or from ordinary communities to get in. That's why I tell you all, if you go to college, just get a degree and be done. It's all about getting the degree. Just get the degree. Go out there and use your natural gifts and talents and make it happen. And if they're not hiring you and paying you, go create your own. God created the internet. Go use the internet for your good. That's God leveling the playing field. So there's this wicked system of oppression that is designed to make people think that they don't matter, that they're losers for being born poor. They're losers for being born ordinary. They're losers for their parents not having money. They're losers because you didn't get in on that sports program because you weren't good enough when the white kid got in because his parents paid off the coach. You all need to go back and have some conversations with your coaches. That's what you need to do. Now that the whole thing has been overturned and something happened 20 years ago where you were the rising star and you need to go have a conversation with a coach and tape it so he doesn't know. Just say, hey, coach, how is it going? Just want to check in with you. You had a great impact on my life, and blah, 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 blah. And you go back into it just to see what they're going to say. You just want to hear what they're going to say, right? You just want to hear what do they have to say. Because the fact of the matter is that these folks have taken advantage of people, right? These folks have gone a long way to prove to people that you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not, you haven't achieved enough. And that is simply not true, people. I'm here to encourage you and to tell you that that's not true. White privilege exists, and they do it simply on the basis of color. That's why everybody's trying to look white. People are all over this world. In Africa, in certain places, people are lightening their skins up, putting in bleaching creams and all kinds of stuff to appear to be anything other than the color they were born in. I don't know. Are you hurting yourself to change how someone thinks about you? I see why, I can understand it, but I don't know that I agree with it. I think you're fine the way you were created. You see where I'm coming from? I think you're fine, but maybe my opinion is not the influencing voice, right? Maybe someone else's voice is influencing you more. And so we got to look at it within the context and from the perspective of who matters, what matters, right? We got to look at it from that perspective, because it makes sense to me about this whole dynamic. This whole college teaching scandal has made me think again, has caused me to want to rethink some things, right? When it happened, my daughter, who is in law school, came to me and she said, so you're really telling me that I'm really truly smarter? I said, but the system has been trying to tell you that from you were 8. Why are you fighting it? From you were 8, you were gifted. I tell you how bad this thing is, to show you how they don't want you to excel. I have 2 daughters. They're 10 years apart, right? So when my oldest daughter was born, we lived in a predominantly white community, in predominantly white communities in Orlando, Florida. And in those communities, I guess she stood out because I think it seems to me that the prevailing thought at the time was that only white kids were smart. So here comes my kid, who was just off the chart smart, right? She just was totally off the chart. So what they wanted to do at one point was they wanted to group all these, in Orange County, Florida, they wanted to group all the smart kids together, especially when they were in middle school. They wanted to group them all together and send them to one school and have them divided by ages in the middle school system, in middle schools, right? And me and the other parents got together and we were like, no, because there might be cameras in the classroom. They might be conducting experiments on your child. Next thing, your child turns out crazy or something. We were like, no, it's okay. They'll just go to regular school and continue to be who they are, right? That was then. Fast forward to my youngest daughter. I'm just telling you my story, right? We moved to Michigan. We lived in Southfield, Michigan. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, was pronounced gifted. You know what the prevailing idea is? The prevailing idea was that they were not going to put her in a gifted program because then that would marginalize other children and make other children feel as if something is wrong with them. I went to the superintendent of schools. I said, do you think I cared? I said, do you think I cared? I said, you're not going to sabotage my child's education because of how you feel that she should be based on the color of her skin. She's born smart. She's born smart because she's a smart person. Do you see what I'm saying? So the prevailing white privilege mentality was that these kids of color should not be this smart because they're kids of color, so they're not smart. That's racism. That's institutionalized racism. And I was here to tear it down. I'm like, so what they did was they eliminated the gifted program totally because they were going to get a lawsuit from me. Do you see? Because I felt that it was unfair, so they totally eliminated it in the school system. And this type of thing continues to happen. So I couldn't bring a lawsuit against them because it didn't exist. You see what I'm saying? Right? But this kind of thing happens all over again. So you're telling me that my kid who was born naturally smart, you want to tell her that her natural smartness is as a result of something else other than the fact that she's born smart, so you're going to try to stop it. Ladies and gentlemen, are you seeing what I'm saying? This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. We have to be able to tap in and to be able to go over this kind of stuff because these things are happening. People everywhere are getting this kind of stuff happen to them, and we've got to do something about it. We have to do something about it. Man, oh man, my life is replete with stories, just like your life is replete with stories of how institutionalized racism has impacted our lives. If you're white, it probably landed on you well. You don't even realize that that's what you're participating in because you've never had to look at life outside of the context and of the color of your own existence. So you can't tell, or it would never have mattered to you. You would have never, you know what I mean, suspected it or anything like that because you've never had to live any other way. When I had to leave my ex-husband, I kid you not, I wondered about some of this stuff. I'm like, how are you going to live? What kind of life are you going to be exposed to? What are you going to, how are the children going to live? Where are they going to live? What kind of world will they live in? I kid you not. I kid you not. And these are some of the, and these barriers exist for a reason. It's all designed to make sure that you do not ascend to the highest ranks and levels of society. That's what this is designed for. All of this stuff is to make it seem that the only way you become a politician, the only way to become a leader, the only way to become a CEO is you have to be born privileged to access that. That's what this is all about. This is why you have to go out and create your own. Chances are you're going to go to college or you've been to college and you're working for someone else. Chances are you are never going to be CEO, president, or vice president. But you know what you can do? Start your own business and become your own CEO. Since being a CEO and a vice president is living in a privileged class, go create your own. And create something that works. Okay? It makes no sense you sit back, and this is why we as people of color fail. People of color fail because we don't group together. We don't do the group dynamics real well. We don't let the group dynamics work for us. When people like me show up and I try to read the room and realize where this is going and redirect the conversation or redirect the ideology, people of color over there are like, look at she, what she do, who she thinks she is. You're tapping right into racism. That's exactly what they want. They divide and conquer. Because that's the prevailing ideology. And you just said, whoa, yes, whoa. It's divide and conquer. So if they can divide the groups up and make them hate on one another, guess what? They win. Every time, all the time. And that, my friends, is why institutionalized racism succeeds. It succeeds because of their culture and the perpetuation of the specific ideology of dividing and conquering. Works every time. A group of colored people show up and white people start dividing people into groups immediately. It comes so naturally. They've been socialized from they were born to do this. They didn't come out of the womb like that, but what they observed in the social groupings and in the conversations that took place around them, they immediately start dividing and conquering. And we all just fall in line, except people like me. And then they say people like me are radical, we're extremists, we're out on the fringe, and we're irrelevant. So don't listen to her, don't buy her books, don't support her. So white people divide and conquer and get into a black person who is trying to do something. And they look for the weaker one, the one whom they can most influence. And they get that one and expose them to it. They're totally divided and conquered. And the black person is in there acting like, oh, I have access to so and so, I have access to so and so. They don't even realize that they're part of a scam. And I'm sitting there like, and the white person is looking at me like, I got you. Because I divided and conquered. Because your friend over there doesn't even know that I did, but you know. And you tell her, but she's not going to listen to you because you don't have the type of influence that I have over her. I have access to how she thinks because it's programmed into me from my great granddaddy came over on the Mayflower. You think this is not so? You should go study epigenetics. Have you studied epigenetics? I have. I've read upon it. And so when you look at this, what white privilege is telling us is that even though it's now modern times and the enslavement of people of color has physically ended, we're going to continue to perpetuate the divide and conquer ideology by ensuring that as few opportunities as possible are given to people of color. So it's going to be about privilege now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to fix it. You see what's going on in Europe with the Brexit deal? That's the masses rising up and said, we don't want this. There's too much intellectualism. We don't want to be part of the European Union. It took away our sovereignty, this and that. So Theresa May came along and she was part of that group and said, well, we're going to withdraw from the EU. And now they have a culture of wars over there. Because one group of people are saying, well, ever since the EU, I lost my job as a machinist. I'm no longer relevant. And now it's creating all kinds of problems. Made me uncomfortable just sitting up, right? Just thinking about it. And it makes me wonder, what is this going to mean for America, right? Well, what is this going to be? Because in certain parts of America, in certain, especially on certain college campuses, the professors are fighting this stuff, right? They're fighting for equality because they feel like if everyone is equal, it's going to reduce certain kinds of things happening in the society. And guess what? It is true, isn't it? Don't you think that if people felt that they were going to win just because they show up, just because they do what is right, don't you think there would be less crime of opportunity? Don't you think there would be less crime? Right? People wouldn't have to rob, steal, kill, and murder if they felt like they could get it really. Like if you really worked hard, like the myth is, if you work hard, you will get it. So people have been working for 50 years and still can't pay off their mortgage. They're still dying debt. That happens way too often, right? People still can't live a comfortable life, especially after the economic downturn of 2008. That just changed everything. People still can't live a decent life. People are still wondering what's next, right? And the rest, they say, is history. So we gotta deal with that, right? White privilege is a thing in America. White privilege is a way of life. It's an ideology. It's institutionalized, right? And people feel like I'm entitled to it just because I'm white. That's just you and your entitlement speaking. But the privilege Privilege is not knowing that you have privilege until you lost it. Like, I didn't know that it existed until I moved out of my upper, you know, whatever community. And then I realized, oh, okay. So this is how life is on the side, on the other side. You didn't realize it was privilege until you lost, until you don't have it, until someone points it out to you, the distinctions that exist. And America was always the kind of society that believed in the middle class because the middle class was where most people were or could afford to be. Now we're shifting to the upper. We are beyond the upper middle class. It's either you're rich or poor now in America, right? And to be poor now is earning less than 120,000 a year, I think, because you're saddled with so much debt. You have student loan debt. You have debt from your house, your mortgage, your car note. You have debt, 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 right? And that debt is what's killing all of us. That debt is making us go completely, completely crazy. So now, when you look at the kinds of attitudes that exist, and even when you look at it, you have to ask yourself this question: is it really that deep anyway? What's the difference between a Harvard education, going to law school at Harvard, and going to law school at, say, I don't know, Baylor University, or maybe that's not a good example, like saying going to law school at Michigan State University? It's the networking. It's who you associate with. So when you leave, you can get a job. That's all they have to sell. And the perception that if you went to Harvard, you have more prestige. Guys, it's the same curriculum. I've been telling my children for years, a law degree is a law degree. A medical degree is a medical degree. It's the same curriculum that has to be satisfied by the Department of Education. A 4-year college degree is a 4-year college degree. It doesn't matter where it comes from because it's the same curriculum. Do you see what I'm saying? So all these other schools are selling are what? Acts is networking that you can put on your resume that you went to law school or you went to college in some place. And so more than likely somebody who has been to college there, or it gives you a certain cachet. It doesn't give you no darn cachet. At the end of the day, we're all going to lay down in a box. At the end of the day, is either you hit the incinerator where they burn you to ashes, or you go in a box where your body deteriorates at the end of the darn day. And the richer you are is the less money you're going to spend on putting someone away because that's just a waste of money. So let's just be clear about that. We've got to stop allowing these barriers and boundaries to divide us. And especially those that are more perceived, we have allowed them to define us. That's my thing with all of this, is how we have allowed it to define us, how we have allowed these boundaries and these perceived myths that there are certain people born into a certain category who have certain advantages that the rest of us don't have. People have allowed those to define them. And because we have allowed it to define us, we have allowed it to influence us. So it influences how we think, it influences how we act, it influences how we present ourselves. And so now you don't win because you don't think you're going to win. You don't win because you didn't go to Harvard Law School, or you didn't go to Harvard Medical School, or you didn't go to the University of Texas, or you didn't go to Stanford, or you didn't go to the University of Southern California. No, that's not why you don't win. You don't win because you don't think you will win. Because you have allowed their thinking to be assimilated into your thinking that if these do not exist, then I'm not worthy. You're not worthy as a person. The fulfillment of your human potential has been overcome and derided by how you think because of what someone else's standards are. Are you listening to me? This is why sometimes you have to take cues from the LGBT community who say they're not going to allow what someone else thinks influence how they feel. That is what we're supposed to do, ladies and gentlemen. Do not let how someone feels about you influence how you think about you and define you to the extent that you won't get further because you tell yourself, well, only people who went to that college. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not go to college. And yet you have seen the evidence of me being with people who went to medical school and law school and all kinds of stuff. What does that do? You know that in the environments I go in as an author and speaker, no one has ever asked me which school I attended. Do you know that? Because when they meet me, they are more concerned about the content that I carry, and they can tell that I have it. They're not concerned about which school I went to. So who on God's green earth are you listening to that you have allowed to define you and the way you think? Think about that. Think about that. That's where this all comes together. So I am saying to you today, as of this day, make it so plain to yourself that you are a winner just because you are. You're a winner based on what you have survived, how you have lived, and the collection of experiences and thoughts that make you unique. Physically, we all come a dime a dozen. The difference, your net worth is your neck worth. From the neck up is what makes the difference. We're all humans. Physically, we are either a male human being or a female human being. What makes the difference is from the neck up. Your neck worth is your net worth. From here on up, how you think is what defines you. You're in a special class of thinkers, of world thinkers and leaders. You're an influencer based on how you think. And don't wait for the accolades to come. It may never come. But how you think, let it continue to define you. Let it continue to be the bastion of who you are. Walk in it. Rock it. Be powerful in it. The way you think is what defines us. So if white privilege is telling us that to enter certain spheres and environments, you have to be privileged, I'm here to tell you, I enter those environments all day. All day when I go into them, no one has ever asked me if I studied at Princeton or Yale or Harvard. Before I go somewhere to speak, I send my resume. My speaker's resume, tell them what I've done. People are usually like, you know something, I need to go back to school because you just made me feel like I haven't done anything. I am like the collection. The sum of my parts is greater than my individual parts. The best parts of me is from my neck up. That's what I promote. What are you promoting? That's what I believe about myself. So the fight is with how you think about yourself. So white privilege is defining how you think about you. Are you going to let it define you? Because as for me, no way, Jose, no time, no way. I am me, an individual created by God to live and conquer on this earth. I have a plan and a strategy and goals. I'm a human being. That's how I see myself. You and nobody else is going to define me based on my color or on my appearance. I wear my hair anyhow I want to. That's why I do. Because of how I think. None of that has anything to do with the collection and the body of thoughts that exist in here. This is my wealth. That's my human capital. I have social capital, but this is my human net worth. Hello. On that note, I should leave you. Go to my website, harrietkamak.com, right? Look me up. Do you see what I'm saying? So we've got to be able to rise above it. At the same time, still tear down the institution of institutional slavery, of institutional racism, because it's still a form of slavery. White privilege is mental slavery. It's enforcing an ideology that only whites prevail. It's still slavery. It is what it is. Want me to say it one more time? White privilege is slavery. It is one of the anchors of slavery. It's what enforced slavery. It's what perpetuated slavery. That to be white was to be part of the privileged set. You want to level the playing field? Tear down racism. Then you get rid of white privilege. Then the playing field will be level. That's my story. My name is Harriet Kamak. Go to my website, harrietkamak.com, and be a part of our experience. Because there's something to the understanding that this is happening. This happens more time than you can ever believe. And so many people have gone to their graves feeling that they are worth less than any other than a white human being. You see it all the time when you travel overseas, how other people treat white people like they're gods. You know where that comes from? People. White people created the myth, perpetuated the myth, enforced the myth. Now it's become a way of life. A white male on this planet Earth can do anything he wants in any country and get away with it. Especially a white male from America or from Western Europe. Jude has power, the power that's been given him by people. He knows it. He's dangerous because he knows it, he understands it, and he works it. I see it every day in white males around me. They look at me and they let me know that you're a female I would have because I can. They let me know. They don't care what the society thinks. They care about what they think. And they let you know. And they can treat you any way they want to. And that's the end of you. Wow, it went quiet. Do you hear the quietness? Because we've got to tear down these institutions that have come to divide us, that seek to separate us from our destinies. Right? And what happens is we have allowed these forms of institutionalized thinking to influence our attitudes and our behavior. Okay. I don't think I need to say more than that. I think you got it. You basically got it. You got it, y'all. You got it, right? You got it. And you might be saying, but Harriet, I'm white. I don't think like that. You don't know that you do until you're in a situation where you realize that you actually do think that you are better than someone else because of color, or you find that you treat people a different way because you've been socialized to believe that you are superior and you should treat people a different way. What I'm saying, in other words, what I'm saying is, you're going to say, if your argument is going to be, well, you're going to counter it by saying, well, there's nothing wrong with feeling superior. Well, at the expense of who? right? That's one. And number two, on what criteria do you feel superior? What's your criteria? Is your criteria because of the color of your skin? Or is your criteria you are superior because of the value of your intellect and the value of your talents and gifts? Do you see the difference? So if your criteria for feeling superior is based on your color, you've just lost the battle because anybody can claim that. It has to be that your criteria for thinking you're superior, if you're going to think so, is based on your collection, the collectivity of your talents, your gifts, and your thought processes. This is why when it comes to achievement, when people are striving, I'm like, what is your goal? What do you hope to achieve? And where are you going with this? What is your end game? At the end of the day, what is it? When you lay down in the pine box, what is it that will define you? What is it that you must say, I did it anyhow? Because that's you. And the reason some of you are like me. That's why you listen to me, because I sound like you, right? I think like you. And what happens is the way that you think, there are people around you who don't like that you think like that because they don't have that. Some people have had inherited wealth and inherited positions, so they didn't necessarily get it because of merit either. Their daddy died and left them, their mommy died and left them, and they occupy the space that mommy or daddy used to occupy, right? And because of the position they're in, they just continue to replicate and duplicate. It doesn't take much to do it, right? But if you were to get them aside to talk to them, you would find out that you're smarter than them and they know it. So they listen to you talk. So when you seek to be with them, yeah, they're going to listen to you because they take your ideas, and because they have access to influence and power, they can perpetuate your idea. And you look like a fool. This is why, what do I say? Guard your content and own your stuff. Don't go sitting with people and giving them ideas. They take your ideas, they're never going to do anything with it, but they're going to take it to someone else where they can spin it, make it their own, and people say, oh man, that's why he's Dr. So and so, that's why he's CEO so and so, that's why he's Bishop so and so, that's why he's Pastor John, that's why he's Mr. So and so, because he thinks like that. No, he got your thoughts. Yeah. So I want you to do me a favor. As you think about all this stuff, as you think about the gatekeepers, which is what institutional racism is, and the people who perpetuate it, the people who, when you submit a college application, they sent it back, the dean of admissions in colleges, they're gatekeepers. They send your application back because they're being paid. They're told that, look, we only have 1,200 spots. Save 900 of it for whites. And of that white, save 100 for the privileged. So when you send in your super duper application with your thesis and your essay, and they reject it, they're not rejecting your thought process. They're rejecting you based on a certain definition that they have to live up to. But when you get the rejection letter, you curl up in a ball and you give up because you said that was the institution of my choice. That's where I wanted to be. And that's where I can't get in because I'm not good enough. No, baby, you are good enough. You are better than good enough. Sometimes they don't commiserate or get around you or talk to you because they're scared of how you think. They're scared of your intelligence because they don't know how to respond. Come on, somebody. And you've got to be able to rise up. This is your call to duty. You're hearing out of me today, your call to duty. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to say about it? This is your defining moment. This is your call to duty. Make sure that what you do, make sure that you take care of yourself. Make sure, right, that you make sure that you do exactly what you're supposed to do. right? And that, my friends, is the story. I think I did something here. I'm just going to cancel, right? Okay? Make sure, because that really is what it comes down to. And that's where we have to win. I got to go, but I want you to tune in tomorrow as we are going to continue to talk about this, because this is expounding and developing. It's developing as we go along, and as it develops, you're finding new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. And I wanted you to be aware of what is going on so that you can live your life to the fullest and live your best life every day. In spite of all of this, still get up and live. Still make your contribution. You are valuable. You are good. There's something good in you. Get up and still write that play, write that song. Make sure you publish that story. Go out and create opportunities. God created www.harrietkamak.com. God created Harriet Kamak. God created you, and God created the internet that gives us all access and has leveled the playing field so that we have access now. So it isn't just confined to a few. You know how the Marines say the few and the great or whatever? Well, this is about the few who choose to take advantage of the opportunities. The opportunities are out there, people. Get up and live every day. If you work 10 hours a day or 12 hours, get up and do something for yourself on your day off. Don't just go lay out at the mall and just go lay out and forget. Do something that builds you up. So at the end of the day, you are just as valuable. I want to encourage you and thank you so much for joining me. My name is Harriet Kamak. You can go to my website to find out more about me. Invite me somewhere, spread this word, share this video, right? Talk about it on your feed so that others can get the same access that you have, access to me and what I impart to you every day. I want to thank you so much and encourage you to continue to do what you do and to continue to help us as we save those who have been damaged by human trafficking. Go to the ExodusFoundation.com, make a donation so we continue to provide services. Whatever donation you give, I thank you anyhow from the bottom of my heart. I'm grateful for whatever you do, because God knows you didn't have to do it, but you saw something in us and you choose to invest in us. And I'm grateful for your support every day. Make sure you join me every day as we continue to talk about this. Be blessed, everybody.